And that's something that often you miss with graphic design. People think it's just about stuff looking good. Yeah, but why does it look good? It looks good because you can see the content more easily, and it feels really nice, and you're not getting distracted by stuff. And so Ingrid probably needs to talk about that more than me.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the World of Presentations podcast, brought to you by us at Presentation Agency 356 Labs. I'm Boris, the founder of the company and your host. And today I'm joined by two guests whose work we admire from afar, from a long, long time. Today with us are Ingrid, you have to help me with your family name.
Mengdehl.
Mengdehl, all right. And Richard Goring from Presentation. Richard, is that correct? Goring,
yeah.
Perfect. I'm doing well now. So from presentation agency BrightCarbon. Both of them will be speakers at the upcoming conference we are hosting, Present to Succeed. And today we're talking about creating dynamic presentations with the help of animations. All right, animations. Ingrid, Richard, welcome. Let's start with a little bit of intro. Maybe Ingrid should go first here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been with BrightCarbon for a while now. I'm a kind of managing design consultant now. So most of my day is kind of spent taking presentation from a client and then just turning them around, making them a lot nicer to look at, but also a lot more communicative for the audience it's been presented to. So just a lot of PowerPoint every day.
Okay. And is it easy to make that?
I think it's quite a steep learning curve, but when you've got the basics, then it's quite easy to kind of make really nice things in PowerPoint. Yeah.
Navigate it. All right. Richard, what about you?
I'm one of the directors of BrightCarbon, and I enjoy sharing cool stuff with people that they can do with presentations. Often that's PowerPoint, but as you say, it's generally about kind of visual stuff or animated stuff that makes it work effectively. So I run a lot of training for people and also help with kind of visual storyboarding of content.
Brilliant. And you have been, both of you, especially Richard, I think, have been sharing, as you said, a lot in the last maybe a year, especially since COVID started. There are I saw at least a few webinars or similar where you were sharing some really cool PowerPoint tips and tricks and ideas of how to animate presentations, PowerPoint animations for that matter. Let's talk about animations, a big topic, huge topic, right? That is something that a lot of people have heard about. A lot of people are using animations and transitions for that matter. When should people actually use animations? Richard,
I think there are probably three points at which you might consider using animation. The first and most essential is to pace the flow of information. Like in general presentations, but especially online, if you put all of your content on a slide all up at once, you lose control as a presenter. So now people are trying to figure things out for themselves. They're looking at something different to what you're talking about. All of the content is coming in different orders, and you've lost them. And in an online environment, like you might be talking about one part of it and they're looking at something else, and you can't even use your body language to focus their attention on something. So pacing the flow of information, really critical. Simple entrance animations, a fade is really good for that. Just one point, the next point kind of thing. And I don't mean bullet points, I mean whatever part of a visual or diagram. Yeah. The second is also very powerful, but maybe not quite as common, which is to help tell stories. So this is where you start to get into some of the more complex animation types. So things like the motion pass and the emphasis animations and whatnot, where changing something on the slide to make it change color or to grow or to shrink or to move can help people to understand part of a complex story or complex sequence. And so that's really valuable, but not something you might be using all the time. And then the third is, it's a nice to have, but it's to make things feel slicker, more professional. It's decorative animations. And this is where you've got to be really careful, because you don't want the animations to distract. You don't want them to interrupt what you're saying, or for people to focus on the animation and not the story, but it can lend an element of slickness, of smoothness, of professionalism to something if you have a little bit of extra animation there that's subtle but worked really nicely.
This is the first time ever I'm hearing someone categorizing the use of animations in this, I would say, beautiful way. So that one was nice. So talking about animations, what do you see before we jump into any other, especially before we talk about the virtual world, which is so interesting and probably not going away, at least for one more year, maybe even more. Like, what do you see with the people that you work with? Do they, like, when they approach you, do they already have something done? How was it done? Is it all right? Is it okay-ish? Is it sometimes surprisingly good? Like, what do you see happening in there? Ingrid, maybe you are the person here.
I mean, yeah, we get a lot of slides from clients. I think there's quite a wide-ranging kind of view of abilities from the clients. Most of the decks don't have any animation at all because people just put some ideas together and then send it to us. And then you can see that some people actually went to the process of adding some maybe grow, shrink, or emotion path somewhere, but maybe not in the most effective way or in the most kind of nice way, because I guess they don't have that expertise that we have in doing it. So I think the problem with kind of clients that we get is that there is so many capabilities to PowerPoint that unless you spend quite a lot of time kind of getting into it and learning about it, you don't really get that knowledge to apply animation very well on your slides. So I think that's one of the issues with it.
Yeah.
And I think, generally speaking, when you get stuff, people don't really consider the use of animation very much. It's like so many people are told no animation at all, and often that comes from an idea of it's got to print, which is kind of fair enough, or computers are really old, or people have been using things like the bounce animation effect in PowerPoint, which is hideous, and it's just there's no point to it. And so what we'll often do when looking at work for clients in this instance is you storyboard things out first of all. So it's almost outside of PowerPoint, and it's thinking, what is it that you want to say here? What is the story? What is it we're going to try and get across? How can we use visuals to do that? How can we use kind of different elements on the slide, but also how can we use animation as part of it? So we'll literally sketch out a storyboard, like, you know, old-fashioned film type of stuff to get a sense of what's going on, and then you can start to build things in a tool like PowerPoint.
Yeah, and how surprised are your customers once you show them, and especially the business user, because a lot of people who are listening are just business professionals that just need to present whether or not they like it, right? So whether they like it or not. But how much crazy cool animations could be in PowerPoint? Are people surprised at the end of the day when they see? Have you had those cases where people are like, wait, that's PowerPoint? Like, wait, is that real? Is that real? Like,
I think there's 2 points to it. Like you often mention some of the things that you guys do at 356 Labs and the kind of conversations you have. And it's the same, you know, we do the same kind of thing. And for people that are just used to presenting, then the reaction is often not so much about the animation, but about the story. So you present some example slides and they go, oh, wow, that's a really good way to tell it. But then, I mean, Ingrid, like, describe what some of your design colleagues, I suppose, who are more purist designers and animators as well, would think about the kind of stuff that you do when you show it to them.
I think it's really interesting because we sometimes do, like, as you say, just storytelling, and sometimes it can be just zooming into a picture, which I mean, most business people want to do. A lot of time they want to zoom into a graph, and they just put the graph bigger on a second slide, where we could just do it on one slide and it's just on the click, it comes up and back. And they don't realize that you can do that. And I think most clients, when the first time we talked to them, we're like, can we add some of your animations in there just to make it slicker, make it more interesting? And they're like, oh, I don't know, maybe that's not a good idea. And we just try to convince them that, you know, to let us try. And then we show it to them and they're like, wow, this is so cool. Because they don't really realize that this is something we can do, and it doesn't have to look horrible, and it actually kind of makes their storytelling better and kind of how they delivered information to their audience.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the companies that we also work with the only animations or the only movement or motion that they have seen in presentations were so bad that they are scared by default, you know.
Yes.
Like they're scared by default, and when they see something that's on a completely different level, they're like, that wait, that is not PowerPoint, right? That can't be. But yeah, maybe that is what makes it so interesting to see those reactions sometimes, especially from some people, you know, that are like, that is not possible or whatever. And you then open the PowerPoint file in edit mode and now everyone's like, all right, what's going on in here? Anyway, the virtual world. Even right now we're in online, obviously. Presentations will be online for who knows how much more time. Any guesses, by the way, how much more will this last? Anyone?
I mean, I'm thinking at least until the end of this year, but I mean, as with Present to Succeed, you're looking at now this world where so many more people can access a conference, and it's very interesting to people because the barriers to entry are much lower. Anyone can get there. You don't have to do all the traveling and whatnot around it. You can fit it in around your schedule. So it's like maybe a lot more of this will stick around for a lot longer, I think.
All right, so if that's at least one more year, we have now 2 years who have 2 years of virtual presenting, online presenting. What about animations in that world? Because there are just so many advices, there is just so much talk about and discussions about, hey, if you're online, limit the animations because there is network connectivity, etc., etc. What are your thoughts there? You're doing a lot of you animate a lot of the presentations for your customers. Like, what are you seeing in that space, and what should we advise the people that are listening to this one?
Yeah, so I mentioned before the idea of 3 categories of animation: for pacing the flow of information, for storytelling, and for decoration. And I think that first one, pacing the flow of information, is really critical because in an online environment, you are not there. It is only your voice. You can't interact with the slides. You can't really tell people where to look very often. And so animation, just to build stuff in, works really well. It doesn't have to be the animation functions in PowerPoint or Google Slides or anything like that. It could just be that you have a sequence of slides. It's the same thing. You're building up the content. And often people say, oh, don't have animation, but they're fine with splitting the content up. It's the same thing. And then people who say, oh, well, you know, the bandwidth isn't good enough, won't have a few simple animations, but will have HD video of themselves being broadcast in a tiny little window. So like, think about the restrictions. If there are bandwidth kind of limitations, then consider turning your video off, for example, whilst you are sharing slides, and flip between the two. And that's often good practice, because if the slides aren't doing anything, maybe turn your video on so that they can then see you. They can connect on a more personal level. But if the slides are doing something useful, then you as a little video thumbnail may well be distracting. So turn that off and allow people to focus on the slides. And you can flip back and forth maybe every couple of minutes or so. And again, it's not too jarring. So when it comes to the actual use of the slides themselves, you've got to think about animations that aren't going to be too distracting, which is good general practice, but aren't going to be too quick or too fast, so that if there is any kind of lag, then people aren't going to notice them. So using some of the simple things like a fade entrance animation just to build things in will work well. But also try to have some level of redundancy in there as well. So if you're getting into some of the more complex animations that might be used for storytelling, say a chart, you've got a bar graph that is going to reduce down. Okay, great. You can use a grow shrink animation to have that shrink down. That works well. But if there is a blip in the connection for the 1 or 2 seconds that takes, then they might miss it. So add in a level of redundancy, like a ghosted view of where the chart was before, so they can see the shrinking, or an arrow that gives you the path of that shrinking. So you've got something there that it could still be static, could still be flat, but the animation is helping people to understand that there has been a shrinkage, and it links in with something else. And this gets into accessibility best practices as well, of having like a redundancy there. Don't just use color coding, use a tick and a cross or something to show other bits going in there. So use it sparingly, but use it appropriately. And generally speaking, bandwidth isn't going to be a massive issue. I think a lot of the platforms, Zoom, Teams, WebEx, they all say somewhere between 2.5 megabits per second is your connection speed, which is usually fine.
Or megabytes?
Hang on. Yes.
Probably
I think it's megabytes, actually. I think it's megabytes, which is then very easy, isn't it? There's that. But you need to be wary as a presenter of your upload speed, because often that's not advertised, and that can be like an order of magnitude less than your download speed. So do a speed test from the machine that you're going to be streaming all of this from, broadcasting it all from, to make sure that the upload speed is appropriate.
Yeah, many people I think haven't thought about that, and this was one of the discussions that we had on the MVP list, which I think the first time I saw it was in the MVP list, where we just started talking about, hey, wait a minute, upload and download really matters here, and especially the upload speeds really matter here. And many people I think that first don't understand that, wait a minute, what is this? Is there a difference here? Like, what, I am paying for this connection, but there are different speeds involved. Like, that is, I think, something that many business people, or just the person that's just at home presenting, is not even considering at all. But second of all, have you, by the way, tried to, because we experimented with a presentation that had to be online, but it was heavily animated, and I mean heavily animated. And we tried to, and by the way, worked very well, surprisingly, on both Microsoft Teams and obviously even better on Zoom, for one or the other reason. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but we actually pushed the limits of the resolution of the machine also, so that we push a little bit less pixels. So we pushed the resolution of the laptop to less than full HD. And then the animation started working way better, like way better. So we went this, 1280 by 720 on the laptop, and then started doing the started streaming the presentation and not uploading, but just sharing the screen with a presentation that was animated. And it was so much better compared to, let's say, a 4K resolution on your laptop or full HD resolution on your laptop. The animations on the same connection in the same place started working way faster. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, because it's cutting the bandwidth requirements by about a third, maybe a quarter of what it is with full HD to go to 720 resolution. So that, and again, it's going to look still really good.
By the way,
a lot of YouTube streaming, for example, is generally going to be at that 720 level, and it's perfectly adequate for what you want to do. Absolutely.
So here you have it, everyone. You can do that one also. Go to the display settings of your computer and lower the resolution before you're presenting. But many people are like, especially here in the office when we were talking, oh, my screen looks bad. And I'm like, yeah, you'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. Live with it, live with it. Anyway, virtual, obviously, we need to be a little bit more careful. Obviously, you said, hey, careful with some of the movements, some of the transitions, some of the animations, some tips and tricks there. Let's talk a little bit about the types of transitions and animations that are present in PowerPoint, because there are so many. I would say, at least in my opinion, I don't know what's your take on it. Are they way too many, Ingrid? What do you think? Do we have too much?
I think there might be some that are a little bit superfluous in how they are. We were talking about this with some colleagues, I think at the start of this week, that something like the airplane transition or the origami bird are maybe not quite needed in there. I think it pushes people to use them if they're there, and if you put that in a business presentation, it's just not very business-like, really. So I think, yes, there is. In all the presentation I do, I probably use 4 main transition, nothing more than that.
Right. Which are your top 4? Like, what are those top 4?
So the fade transition is kind of default. If the client is not really requiring anything else, I just put a fade transition on every slide, and it just is a little bit smoother when you move from one to the other. Obviously Morph, because Morph is amazing, and obviously for a newer version of PowerPoint, but it kind of lets you do some really cool animation stuff between slides. I like a good push transition, because it really helps you if you want to kind of do your storytelling in kind of a bit more of an advanced way. You could move forward and backwards in your presentation, or you could move down if you want to drill down into a certain topic. So the brush transition is really good to kind of move into space and kind of have this little bit of a additional depth to your storytelling as well, which is really interesting. And I think the wipe transition as well is one of the ones I use, but nothing really beyond that. I think the other ones are a little bit too flashy for my liking.
So if it was for you, you'll probably make the user interface very simple. Like there won't be a drop-down menu with multiple transitions.
Exactly. I think
just one advanced tip on the push transition. That kind of is like the old-fashioned 35mm slides where it's kind of pushing things physically, but it does your entire slide. So if you're listening and you want to play around with this, Ingrid's idea of kind of moving back and forth around a timeline or panning around a kind of a large canvas kind of thing, push gives you something really good, but it moves the entire slide, including all of your background elements and things. So if you've got a corporate background, which has got gradients or graphics or something, it doesn't work quite so well. So if you do just open up PowerPoint and go to the transitions tab, there are some types of transitions down at the bottom of that drop-down menu that you mentioned, Boris, called the dynamic content transitions. And so one there called pan is really good. It does essentially the same thing as push, but it only does the content and not the background. So it doesn't look quite so jarring, and it's just a nice, smooth way of doing it. And again, it comes back to that point of it's not distracting. It feels smooth and natural, and you're moving through this journey that you want to take your audience on.
Yeah, Ingrid, you were about to say something.
I've lost it now.
Yeah, I was about to ask, did you lost it?
That's okay. That's
okay, what about animations? Let's go.
Animation, I think I use probably more animation than I do transition. I think in entrance-wise, so the little green star, everything that kind of brings an element to your slide, kind of fade, wipe, fly in, if done properly, are good. Zoom as well. So I think those 4 ones are the one I use the most. There's some stuff under the heading of exciting, which I stay very much away from because most of the time they are a little bit too exciting for a slide. And I think this is what people try to do when they don't really understand how to use animation in PowerPoint. They think, oh, this is really flashy. It will draw my audience's attention to it, but not in a good way. So I think sometimes just something a little bit more subtle, but that's control is just a little more effective. Yeah. Otherwise, in terms of the emphasis animation that Richard was mentioning earlier, grow shrink is really good. Big fan of that. Anything that's also changing color can be really useful. So you can change the color of a shape as something moves. So you could move to red to green or something like that, which is quite useful. And also the spin animation. If you're animating a car or something and want to make it look really nice, you can make it a real spin, but you can also kind of mix it with lots of other animation and something really cool with that. So yeah.
Just anything to add here? Or Ingrid, go ahead. We don't want you to lose it again. Let's go.
Sorry, I'm just going through the list. In terms of kind of exit animation, it's kind of the opposite as the entrance one, kind of fade out and wipe out and fly out, all of these. And then the motion path, I think the basic is kind of, the straight one. It's pretty versatile. But also the custom motion path is quite amazing because you can like move things wherever you want in your slide and really kind of control where it goes. So yeah, these are my favorite ones.
All right. Richard, anything to add here? Because I have a question already.
I think that the standard animations that you get in PowerPoint, as Ingrid said, those dozen or so that she's mentioned are the ones that I would default to as well, just because they aren't distracting. Things like boomerang and credits and
I love the bounce.
They're hideous and they just don't work very well. But what you can also do to make it feel less PowerPointy, to get the kind of reactions we were talking about before, like, oh, this isn't PowerPoint, is you combine animations. So the zoom animation that Ingrid talked about is kind of nice because the content, the object kind of comes in from nothing, from an infinity point to kind of where you are. Or you can have it zoom the other way, so it's kind of coming from like your perspective and it drops onto the slide. But both of those are quite extreme. So if you add a fade animation and a zoom animation at the same time, it can feel much smoother. And then you were talking to Tom Howell a couple of months ago about this, and Tom from Synapses Creative is also great at looking at kind of animation elements. You combine that zoom and that fade entrance animation, so say it's zooming in from nothing, so it's kind of growing bigger, it just stops, and that also doesn't feel very natural. So you can add an additional animation, which is a grow shrink animation, so that as it gets to the point where it grows a little bit more, and then it shrinks down again. So it now feels, again, more natural, more smooth. You've now got 3 animations there, or maybe even 4 animations, all combined on the same object, all to happen within the space of a second. It might be unnecessary. It's certainly not going to help with the storytelling, but it feels more natural. It feels smoother and slicker. And so in a way, actually is less distracting, because it just looks like a regular object. Your brain isn't thinking, well, that isn't real. And so the more you can get into more natural stuff with it, if you have the time to do it, the smoother things can look.
Yeah, where do you are saying it looks natural, right? Which is so on point. Where should people take inspiration from? Like, where should the person who is not a designer look for, like, hey, here is what a natural animation should look like, and maybe here is how I can simulate that even in PowerPoint. But where is that inspiration from for the natural type of movement that when you see it, it's like, that looks okay to me. Like, it's not distracting. It doesn't look like something is broken or not finished well. Like, where do you advise people to just extract ideas from? Any major resource? Anyone? Ingrid, you're about
I think I might take that one, because that was my field of studies. If you so there's lots of principles on making animation kind of looking lifelike and close to nature. There's the 12 principles of animation that Disney kind of made quite famous, and it's about how bouncing and how elements kind of interact with physics and kind of bounce and kind of slow down or go faster depending on how they move. There's a lot of articles online if you just look for the 12 principle of animation, and most of them are very helpful little GIFs that kind of show you what it means. So it's a good thing to look at. And I think the main one is just to look at nature around you and looking at people and how they move and how they interact. So for example, if I move my hand, it's not going to be, very robotic. There's like slow down and then go faster. So just looking around you and seeing how things kind of move around you and taking inspiration from that would be my
All right.
recommendation.
Go ahead, Richard.
And PowerPoint does help you with some of that. You've got to delve a little bit into the menus, but Ingrid before mentioned an entrance animation called Fly In, which when used, but was a big caveat of when it's used properly. And this is it. Like, if you have a fly in animation, you've got a box in the middle of the screen. Fly in animation will bring that box in from the edge of the screen, any edge that you like, and it will just kind of fly in across the slide. And on the face of it, that looks terrible, because it's kind of coming in and then it stops. And it looks terrible because it feels really unnatural and it's totally unnecessary. But if you were to go to the animations options, so effect options, you've got all sorts of different things you can do with more of the motion-based animations like Fly In. And you've got something called smooth start and smooth end. And that means that it can accelerate and it can decelerate when it's stopping. And so if you put a smooth end on that animation, then instead of just flying into the screen and stopping abruptly, which feels unnatural, it will fly in from the edge of the screen and gradually slow down, which is what a real object would do if it were there kind of physically. So again, that kind of thing of looking at smooth start, smooth end, maybe a bounce end as well when used appropriately, just very quickly help you to get the kind of the natural stuff that Ingrid mentioned and that are in those 12 principles that Disney came up with.
All right, so there are 12 principles. So someone who is listening to this one, once you stop driving, Google it. 12 principles of Disney. Anyway, Ingrid, a lot of people ask us, why would I use Morph when I have motion pad, or vice versa, right? Why would I use motion pad when motion pad? Anyway, you got the point. So like many people say, wait a minute, I can move objects with motion pad. Like, why would I do it with Morph? What would you say to those people? They are very rare, of course, they're very rare because not that many people know what motion path is. But still, what would you say to those people?
I think it really depends on your presentation and what you're trying to do with it. So obviously, I mean, Morph is wonderful. The problem with it is that it creates a lot of slides if you want to kind of move things around. So every movement is a new slide, which can sometimes go a little bit out of control, and you can end up suddenly with 60 slides and you're not quite sure how. So if you do have that restricted number of slides that you want to keep to, then you should keep to kind of motion path and try to work with that. And I think we've worked for several years just with motion path, and I think they're perfectly fine to use if that's what kind of works for you. Yeah, that's what I would say.
If I can add something to it, so Ingrid also mentioned the custom motion path. So that's where it's not going to just move in a straight line, but say you've got a site map and you want to show the movement around a site map of how people might walk, for example. So a custom motion path is really useful for that because you can show people moving through an entrance and then up a stairway and then through corridors and whatnot. And of course, they're moving in all sorts of different directions. And rather than having one straight motion path and another and another and another, which can be really complicated and time consuming to do, and motion paths can be a bit finicky, you can just draw your own single custom motion path around, and that works really nicely. You can't do that with Morph. So again, just taking a step back, if anyone is not familiar with Morph, by now, hopefully you should be, but it's a transition which allows you to seamlessly move from one slide to the next. So if you have an object on a slide in one place, say on the left, and on the next slide, you move the object to the right-hand side, the Morph transition in slideshow mode will seamlessly move that object from the first position to the next position. Or if you're a Keynote user, it's Magic Move, which has been around for like seemingly decades now. So it got there first. But that's great if you want straight point to straight point, but not so good if you want something a bit more custom. And so that's where you have to blend the idea of a morph versus a motion path. Or to get to the point we talked about before with the smooth start and the smooth end, Morph will always accelerate and then decelerate. It will give you that smooth start and smooth end, and you can't control it. So if you wanted to have several slides, it's going to look like something is moving and then stopping and then moving and then stopping. And it's not going to give you a seamless motion over the course of several slides. And also, everything happens at once. You can't change the timing for something. So it's all going to happen over 2 seconds or 1 second or 5 seconds, as opposed to, well, this thing is moving more slowly and this thing is moving more quickly or changing or whatever else. So there are pros and cons to it, but used in combination, it can be really very powerful.
Yeah. So I hear you say more or less, wait a minute, these are actually two completely different tools, right? And depending on what you need to achieve, you need to know what can each one of those actually do for you, and see and understand very well the limitations of each and every one of those. Because otherwise, if you're just very, as I like to say, people are, at some point they become romantic to a technology or to a platform or to a tool, and then they're like, oh, everything that's not Apple doesn't work. It's fault, like by default, Microsoft is just bad, you know, or vice versa. Like if I'm a Microsoft fan, everything that's Apple, it's crap, it's not working. These guys are selling it for way more than it needs to be, etc., etc. So it seems like these are tools, and we need to yet again understand, hey, wait a minute, these can allow us to do different things, and based on what we want to achieve, we need to go with one of those, like either the motion path or the morph.
Totally agree.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So you are also going to have a session at Present to Succeed that will touch on PowerPoint. Give us a little bit of insight of what should people expect there. Who is going to take that very complicated and hard to answer?
I think we can both contribute to it, but we'll both be contributing to the session. So it's going to be looking at ways that you can use PowerPoint to create kind of visual storytelling sequences that will really work well. But I think because of the nature of the conference and lots of different people there, we want to make sure that you're getting something from it, whether you're relatively new to presentations or kind of fairly advanced. So looking at some of the simpler techniques, the quick wins, the productivity shortcuts that will just make you faster in doing things, but then also say, well, like I talked before about combining animations, you can combine different techniques. There's this thing that's very simple, this thing that's nice and easy, this thing that's pretty quick. Combine all of those together and look at what you get. And that's when you get people saying, oh, wow, I didn't realize PowerPoint could do that. And then trying to apply some really good graphic design principles so that things are not only looking good, but accessible for people. And that's something that often you miss with graphic design. People think it's just about stuff looking good. Yeah, but why does it look good? It looks good because you can see the content more easily and it feels really nice and you're not getting distracted by stuff. And so Ingrid probably needs to talk about that more than me.
No, I agree. I think this is something we try to teach our designers as well as they join, that it's not just about the slide looking good. It's also got to present well. So you've got to think about that when you design it. It's just, oh yeah, no, I'm going to make a nice little text box there. You have to think about how it's going to be delivered to the audience, and kind of try to put things on the slide where they should be and where they're going to draw attention. And how you're going to kind of get your storytelling a little bit better. So I think we'll kind of cover these points as well in the session, just how to make storytelling a little bit easier and smoother.
Perfect. And you said something that is, I just want to ask that one. Like you said, hey, we're talking with our designers and helping them out with that stuff, obviously, especially when they join, right? What do you, that's just me asking, like, what do you see? And let's see whether or not in the UK is the same. What do you see in professional designers? How do they think, and what is their intuitive first reaction when they see or when they hear that they need to be working inside of PowerPoint? Are they excited, like are they going nuts? Or is it like, wait, I'm a professional designer, I don't touch PowerPoint? What do you see there?
I think a lot of them are a bit wary and maybe they don't realize what you can do I think most of the people we kind of have joining in don't realize all you can do in PowerPoint. So the first 3 months are usually a journey of discovery and delight. So I think there is in the design community, I've got a few friends who do graphic design. There's a little bit of looking down onto PowerPoint because people they do not know how to use it and do not know the capabilities. But I recently taught my friend how to kind of create a master in PowerPoint because she had no idea how to do it and was asked to do it. And she was like, oh, this is so cool. I didn't realize you could do all these things. So I think it's a little bit sad that people are not aware of PowerPoint's capabilities. And I think graphic designer especially, because it's a really cool tool to use.
Yeah, my favorite one, by the way, is when any one of the people that we work with, or even people that are coming to the trainings, or we work on a training basis, when the first time when even people like that, financial people, HRs, just not plain simple designers, they see that this thing that's called selection pane exists. That's like a shocker, like, wait, what? and my favorite moment is when a designer sees that for first time. Like, that is just such a great moment. It's very hard to explain sometimes, like, it's that, like, and you see the resistance in them, because some designers that we had, the first question that they asked when they saw that selection pane is there and exists is that they cannot accept it, and they ask something like, so that's something new, right? Right? They just cannot accept the fact that they didn't know about that for so many years, and now, wait, that's something new, right? And when you tell them, hey, it's not, no, it's not, they're like, oh, wow, that's so sad.
I particularly enjoy things like that where you say, no, that was I think first introduced in 2001 or maybe 1997.
Yeah, anyway, let's not get nerdy here, because that can get like very boring to a huge part of the audience. Anyway,
but it does bring up a point, though, actually, of Ingrid and your experience, and I have exactly the same thing. It's people maybe expect that presentations don't take a lot of effort. that you put them together at the end, and PowerPoint especially doesn't really help with that, because you open it up and the first thing you see is click here to add text, and so everyone types away and clicks to add text, and they wouldn't ever do that if you were designing a website or a poster or a brochure or an infographic or anything like that, because you open up any of the Adobe suite and it's blank. And so I think that is different, that they expect the presentations to be much quicker. Oh, I can throw this together in 5 minutes, as opposed to, no, it probably requires a similar amount of effort as one of these other things, an animation that you might create, an explainer video or something, or a poster or an infographic. And so look at the tool, look at the submenus. I know that it shouldn't be in submenus, but look at them, and that's where you then start to see the power of it, compared to a haiku deck or something, which is an online kind of presentation thing, which is just big picture in the background and a couple of words, which has its place, but it's not what most presentations are going to be about.
Yeah, absolutely. And for sure, as part of the session, but let's also mention it here, BrightCarbon also did a very interesting add-in for PowerPoint. Do you want to kind of mention it very quickly, because I think that it's just a great add-in, not to mention that it's completely free, and as some of my friends in the US say, it's so free we don't even ask you for an email, right? That is that free. So who is going to kind of give us the 1-minute overview of what you guys have done there?
Yeah, so we work in PowerPoint all the time, as do you, and I'm sure many other people, and we have a lot of frustrations, as do many people as well. So we started to look at ways that you can solve some of those, and we're essentially a presentation design agency, and so a lot of the functions there are design kind of frustrations we're trying to solve. But we built an add-in for PowerPoint called Bright Slide that just solves a lot of the issues, like the grid structure, the alignment tools, some of the animation functions. I talked about combining animations. Doing those manual all the time is a pain, so we've got an animation library that's built into it. So it's just lots of things that come from users of PowerPoint when creating presentations to solve problems. And so we built it as an add-in for ourselves, to use on a daily basis. And we thought actually it works quite well. We love to share things with the community. You said at the start, some of the masterclasses we do every Thursday, pretty much for 30 minutes, we'll do a live webinar masterclass covering really cool stuff that you can do for free. And so we thought, yeah, let's share this with people, and it's been very well received, which is great. So you can go to the BrightCarbon website and download that. If you are a power user or a designer in PowerPoint especially, I think it'll be very valuable to you to create content.
Definitely, I cannot recommend it more. Like, we'll make sure that I will link it up in, so not me, but our team will link it up in the show notes and also in the blog post that's coming up, especially people who are admins on their machines. You can install that. Otherwise, you will have to ask the IT admins or the IT department to approve that. Anyway, one last question before we end and before we wrap this up. Let's see who gets that one first. Who is that person or people that we should invite to our podcast next? Who is that person or people? Ingrid, you already have a name, I think. Who is the person that you connect with presentations that made an impression on you in one way or the other, that you're like, this person or like this group of people are really cool? It would be great if you have them on the podcast. Anyone that pops up in your head?
I think most people I would name have already been on there, which makes it really difficult.
All right, you can still try. Let's see. I'm writing down, so Richard, in the meantime, you can also come in and join in and help her out. Anybody?
So you've already had some wonderful and amazing people. In fact, everyone has been wonderful and amazing. Yeah. And what I really like about the podcast actually is that it gives you so many different viewpoints from lots of different perspectives. So I'm thinking, you've mentioned Echo and maybe Julie together. Have they been on yet?
There are, remember. By the way, it's a secret that we have 20 unpublished episodes yet. So.
That's it. So that also doesn't help particularly. So you've got, and again, you've mentioned them before. So check out the Presentation Guild, just generally speaking. Presentationguild.org is a really good community of people that are just like us, that are kind of presentation professionals. Some of the board members there, you've had Bethany already. You've had... who else from the board members of that? But, you know,
We
Tom
didn't
Howell
have, we
was...
still don't have Nancy, but someone in the last episode, in the previous episode that we recorded yesterday, said Nancy, so it doesn't count if you say that one.
Yeah, and so you look at that as the community, and Nancy Duarte, of course, is on there too.
Yep.
And so I think that's really good sources. And then what I've really loved about the World of Presentations podcast and Present to Succeed is just going maybe outside of pure presentations and pure PowerPoint a bit. So two others from slightly removed. I would suggest that you check out Bianca Woods. So you can follow her on Twitter at eGeeking. And Bianca is part of the e-learning guild. Now that's kind of related to presentations because, of course, it's the same idea. It's visual communication stuff. It's just self-guided rather than presented live. But you get a lot of really good ideas from e-learning content because it's now interactive, and it's about actively engaging your audience, which of course you need to do in presentations, especially in an online virtual world. So I would look at Bianca because she's a great advocate for community to share really cool stuff. Another one to check out is Mike Taylor. Now Mike is Mike T, I think, on Twitter, so you can follow him. He's got a great community. He's again from the e-learning world. He used to work for Storyline, so Articulate rather, the company that produces Storyline, which is an e-learning authoring tool, and he again will pull together lots of really, really cool ideas and things that you can do. So if you are on Twitter, follow eGeeking and follow Mike T, because they are like a community board almost for the kinds of things that they do, and they will push all of these different ideas. So you'll get inspired by them, I suspect. And of course, whilst we're at it, shameless plug alert, follow at BrightCarbon on Twitter as well for all your presentation related needs and services. But again, like we try to
link that one up.
We try to share really cool stuff, but I would look to those kinds of people who pull from lots of others to share things with you, to inspire you.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely, I cannot agree with you more when you talk about the conference itself. It's not that it is us behind it or whatever. It's just that when we think about presentations, all of us in our community agree that it's not just the design, you know, it's not just the design, even though I really hope all of us appreciate great design and are searching for those incredible slides, etc. It's not just the design, and that's why we said, hey, we don't want to create a presentation, a conference that's more or less PowerPoint-ish, Apple keynote-ish thing, that we just talk about how to use the tools and how to design great things in it, because there is so much more to it, right? That's why we have the storytelling track. That's why we have the design track, of course, but that's why we also have the public speaking track, where we're going to be talking about, hey, there is person like Mark Bowden, like Chase Hughes, like all of those incredible people that will share, I would say, just in eyes. When Chase, by the way, sent me his session, I don't know if you know Chase. So Chase is more or less training America's leading behavior expert. Mm-hmm. So he sent me his session, and the first words of his session were extreme persuasion. And I was like, holy moly, that is going to be nuts. That is going to be crazy. So I was like, Chase, it's done. We have it. Don't think about another one. Let's go with this. But also,
like one of the podcast episodes that I really liked, was it last year? The airline pilots. I'm just Mario. So like again, it's like. Yeah. You wouldn't expect to speak to the pilot of the world's largest airplane about presentation, and yet it was such a good episode, and I'm really looking forward to that as part of the conference. And again, it's not something you would ordinarily do if you're thinking about presentations, but go beyond. Like Ingrid, what is your favorite source of animation ideas? You told me earlier that you think everyone should watch.
Shaun the Sheep.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, 10 minutes episode. It's about a flock of sheep in British countryside, and it's all stop motion. But it's the most amazing storytelling that they do in very short episode and without any words as well. So it's just sheep, basically. But it's incredibly funny, and it is amazing storytelling. So if you want something a little bit out of the box that is not business, just watch Shaun the Sheep.
And just for context, Shaun the Sheep is from Aardman Studios, who did Wallace and Gromit and lots of other kind of stop motion things. So they're the biggest stop motion studio. So it's like it's a big endeavor, but they make these things that are just so elegant and it's good for stuff like that. So outside of the traditional world of presentations is what I would encourage people to do.
Ingrid will send it over and we'll link that one up. All right. So what is the best place? Obviously, we will link up BrightCarbon, the add-in, the website of the company, of course, the presentation guild yet again. But what is the place? What is the network, the social media network that people can reach out to you? Like, what is the one that you use most?
Typically use Twitter the most. I think we're on LinkedIn as well.
All right.
But yeah, those.
Twitter and LinkedIn. Ingrid, what about you?
Same, Twitter and LinkedIn as well.
All right, that is interesting. Again, you're seeing me typing down and writing those things down. I will find you on LinkedIn, on Twitter, not on LinkedIn, and I will make sure that we link everything up. I mean, we are out of time. That's it. We're out of time. That's it. We can move on and we can talk about that for many, many hours. Obviously, I cannot wait for the session at the conference, but we probably need to repeat that at some point in the future. Again, maybe 6 or 7 months from now, we can maybe talk about something related to something else but animations, you know. So if you're in for the idea, I will make a note and we'll jump on a podcast again. Are you in?
Delighted to.
It would be great.
Thank you.
That will be perfect. Great. So thanks again for joining. That was I think I still am amazed that while I'm listening to this one, because Richard will remember that I was are we going to do an animation episode on podcast? Like, are we going to do podcast on animations when you cannot see them? He was like, no, it will work. And I'm like, sure, let's go. But it really, at least for me, it worked, even though I'm still hosting and asking you guys the question, and I think it really worked, Richard. So kudos to that one that you have seen this working before it actually happened.
And the reason for it is because it's so either poorly abused because people are using boomerang animations or something and it's crazy, or they're not doing it at all, which again I think is really bad in the online world. I think it's really vital for definitely that pacing and maybe storytelling as well. Just do it. It doesn't take a long time.
Perfect. Thank you guys for joining. Thanks again.
Thanks, Boris.
Staying here for almost probably an hour already. So we will link everything up in the show notes, in the blog post. It will be everywhere. BrightCarbon slide, the add-in, their Twitter accounts, their LinkedIn accounts. You can find them and spam them from now on. And of course, for sure, take a look at BrightCarbon's masterclasses that they're doing. Was it each Thursday?
Yeah, every Thursday for 30 minutes. We do really cool stuff.
Every Thursday.
But I mean, lovely shameless plugs. I really appreciate them. Thank you so much. But like, from my perspective, if you are listening to this and you haven't yet looked up the Present and Succeed podcast conference, I know that you mentioned it, Boris, but do, like, I am genuinely excited for this because it brings so many different people together. It's going to be really good. So definitely
it will be a very crazy event. That I can promise you. For sure, check out Present to Succeed, our website 356labs.com. Let's not spam anymore the people that are listening to this one. Thanks again for listening and see you in the next one. Bye.